Nelson Mandela has to be seen as one of the great pivotal figures in human history. And I say this understanding, of course, the complexities of his life and the complexities that go along with the current situation in South Africa. I'm quite familiar with the history of the struggle in South Africa, and certainly the history of the contemporary situation in that beautiful country. But I think when we start talking about Nelson Mandela, we need to understand a number of things. One, that the man's life is a life that in many ways must be seen for its character and for its courage and for its commitment. But also he was the iconic symbol of the mass struggle of the people of South Africa. That we cannot make this simply a personality situation where we don't realize that he was the embodiment of many things in the struggle. For example, sometimes we talk about Mandela in terms of his imprisonment, but there were many people in South Africa who were imprisoned. And there were people imprisoned at Robben Island, and there were people who were imprisoned long before and long after Nelson Mandela. And there were those who were imprisoned for more than 27 years. So I think that the imprisonment itself is not what gives him his character. I think that it is the ability of Winnie Mandela and others around the world to basically propagandize the struggle by virtue of seeing Mandela, who was a key figure in the creation of the militant wing of the ANC, particularly what we call MK, Umkhonto Wesizwe, because that organization, the Spear of the Nation, made it possible for white people to understand that they too, as Fanon would say, could also bleed. So it's the fact that he was a militant anti-racist, that he was a dynamic, eloquent spokesperson for the struggle, along with the fact that he was in prison and then from his prison cell was made into an international hero and symbol for the struggle. This is what constitutes the persona, if you will, of Nelson Mandela. Now, of course, part of the complication is that when he became president in 1994, that there were things that could not be achieved that the masses of people thought should have been achieved. In fact, there were those of us who were revolutionaries outside of South Africa who also felt that. I mean, we had pursued this struggle very vigorously. Many of us in support, not just financially, but morally, from medical supplies and foodstuffs and material. And people had been very much engaged in the struggles in Southern Africa. I know that when I went to live in Zimbabwe in 1980, 81, 82, that we were still engaged with this struggle because this was a key struggle. And my name, Molefi, for example, comes from solidarity with the South African people. That's why I chose that name to go along with Kete Asante, which, of course, are Ghanaian names. But this struggle that Nelson Mandela came to be the great symbol for was a mass struggle. I mean, and it took many characteristics. It was not simply ANC. The Black Consciousness Movement, led by Steve Bantu Biko, was perhaps one of the most electrifying movement of the South African struggle, based to a large degree on some of the teachings of Mangalizo Subukwe, who was the leader of the Pan-African Congress, which was also very active and actively involved in the struggle. ANC, of course, becomes a leading edge, and it becomes the leading edge and the vanguard edge to a large degree because, again, of its own ability to propagandize its message with its charter and its non-racial message, which became, of course, a very powerful message for those who were communists and people like Chris Hani and other people who participated in the struggle and who participated in the struggle and not only participated in the struggle, but they also demonstrated that the struggle was multifaceted. And because it was a multifaceted struggle, the struggle engaged men and women, young people who were demonstrating, who were fighting, people who crossed the Limpopo and came into the country to carry out the armed struggle. There were many facets that Nelson Mandela understood and knew. But once he became president, he discovered that South Africa did not have in its treasury what they thought that it should have had, because the white minority regime had basically mortgaged up the country. And one of the first things they had to do was to take a loan from IMF. Now, some people see this as the results of the ANC negotiators being unable to understand what was going on with the white minority regime, with de Klerk and Botha and those people. But one of the things that we know is that the decisions that had to be made were pragmatic on the part of Nelson Mandela. He never gave up a revolutionary spirit, never gave up his revolutionary principle against the oppression of any people, anywhere, who were oppressed by imperialist capitalism or other forms of discrimination or racism or violence. But what they discovered, to operate a country, to actually participate in national government and to run a nation of millions of people and to provide for them what you need to provide for them, they did not have the wherewithal to do these provisions, simply because they had to worry about how the country was going to make its payments day by day. So consequently, they had to cut back on some of the progressive actions that should have been taken. And in fact, what they did do was to be able to do what they could. And one of those things was simply, for example, to take people who were living in the townships and to say to them right away that you don't have to pay any rent anymore. Actually, the houses that you've been paying for in the townships belong to you. You just simply have to get your deed. Or to bring running water to the various townships. They were able to do things like that. And they were able also to pass various tax laws to, in other words, try to make a redistribution of some of the funds, to create new laws that would make it possible for Africans to participate in whatever corporate profits and wealth were being accrued by the minority people. So all these things were really, as we understand, they were peripheral. But they were only peripheral in the sense that the main struggle, which was land redistribution, remained to be achieved. And even today, with the death of Nelson Mandela on December the 5th, 2013, we still have a situation where land redistribution is necessary and is going to be one of the coming struggles. There's no question in my mind that the vanguard has in many ways been indicated by the people like Julius Malema and other people who have decided that, hey, you know, at this time we really need to press forward and have a more equitable distribution of land. Nelson Mandela would have gone for this, would have been for this, and he, of course, believed in this. And I think that to some degree, when we look at the one term of his presidency, it may very well be from the standpoint of distance and history that the interpretation may be made that Mandela also understood what was coming and what was necessary in South Africa. So I rank him for his moral character in the same line as I would any other significant human being. I tell people all the time that if we can honor the Jewish Jesus and if we can honor the Arab Muhammad, there's no reason why we should not honor the African Mandela. Because Mandela, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Mother Teresa, and any of the popes that you consider to be great, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey and Dessalines, all these people had strong characters, strong wills, and they were in many ways inspirational for millions of people. Mandela's role in history and his place in the lives of his own people and the lives of all people who work for overcoming oppression will be memorable, and I can only see him living forever.